Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about Castlevania, very specifically Season 4. Just so you know, there is going to be spoilers ahead for the final season, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled, please don't continue to watch. As of the time of recording, it is the day after Castlevania was released on Netflix. It is now available, the whole season's available. I essentially got through it in a whole day. I have no life. It's fresh in my mind and we're going to have a talk about it. I probably will miss some stuff. Whatever I say is going to be based upon how I watched it and what I kind of gravitated towards and what I didn't gravitate towards and that kind of thing. If I miss something, soz. There is going to be no footage of Castlevania. It's just me sat in front of a camera talking shit. Quick disclaimer before we start. If for whatever reason I say I like or dislike something, if for the same reason you have the opposite opinion, you're not wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong. Everyone is right. It's all subjective. And let's just have some fun and let's talk about it. I think I should start this video by very quickly saying, by the way, that I didn't dislike the final season. I'm pretty sure I'm going to title this video something like Castlevania Season 4, the worst season of them all. Because clicks. Which isn't untrue. I do think it's the worst season. I wouldn't say worst, but my personal least favourite. But I love Castlevania. I really love it. And I watched it, I actually came to it quite late in the day. I watched it last year and I blasted through seasons 1, 2 and 3. Was very disappointed when there was no more to watch, and then obviously season 4 got announced and they were like, it's the last season, fuck you, whatever. But I enjoyed this season, and I'm going to talk about first of all, I'm going to talk about the good things. Because the thing is, the framework for a really solidly good season are there. I just think for a few reasons it fell short, and I think it started strong, ended weak, basically. So let's talk about the good. I think when it first started, and like literally the first maybe 5 episodes, are the best of the season, because it sets up what's happening in the season really well. It sets up the state of the world and the kind of the opening montage of the first 6 weeks of Treasure, fuck off. Come on, Tyler, pay attention. Trevor and Cypher. And them going through this, you really, like, it tells it really well, because you really get a sense that they're like knackered, basically, and they're going through the ringer, and essentially I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it starts straight away from where season 3 ended and goes from where that ended, and kind of, we get to a point 6 weeks later where everyone's kind of bruised, battered, and going about their daily lives. It does that really well, and it starts to set up like little arcs with Trevor, Cypher, with Alucard. It sets up like really interesting new characters as well. I'm horrible with names, by the way. I only remember like the main characters because I've had like 4 seasons with them. So pardon me. It's not, I just can't retain that shit. It is what it is. The protector, the leader of the royal guards in Tagavista, she was super cool. I don't like where her character went, to be honest. I think this is the thing. I think it started, the new characters that were introduced started really well. And I just think that this season was very compact, and what I think this season suffered for was kind of a Game of Thrones type of thing. Not that bad, but I think because they were trying to end it and get so much packed into this one season to end it and wrap it up and tie little bows on everything and give everyone like a send-off and that kind of thing, I think it suffered for that. And so the new characters didn't really get much of a see-in because of that, because it was trying to tell a nice final kind of story for the characters that we already have. That being said, that goes really nicely into my next point, because I think the highlight of this season, or at least for me, the character endings that I liked the best were probably Isaac and Hector. Throughout the entire series, I think their arcs have probably been the most interesting for me. Especially Isaac, he was this kind of, stoic forge master, didn't say much, was very kind of like, resolutely on Dracula's side and loyal to Dracula. And then, last season we see him become this autonomous figure that's like, do you know what, fuck it, I have power and I'm going to use it. And I'm going to say, I'm going to take over the fucking world, suck a dick, get out of here, I've got the power to fuck you all up, I'm going to use it. And he does, and it's so cool, and like I love that, and I love that in this season you see that they're so powerful. You've got Dracula, you've got these vampires, you've got Trevor, you've got Cypher, Alucard, all these people, and yes, Hector's fucked over last season. He's so fucked over, and we'll get to that, by the way. But in this season, you really see them come to the height of their power, and you see them kind of like come out on top as possibly some of the most powerful characters in the series, which I love, because I came to love their journeys, especially Isaac, and the journey of self kind of discovery on his part. And I love that the show had the balls to be like, yeah, fuck it, he has this on the surface very kind of bad guy vibe, you know, but he's not, or at least it's grey and it's complex, and I like that. And they didn't fuck him over by killing him off or whatever it might be. They gave him a happy ending, which I think a lot of shows would have been like, no, he's done bad stuff, he's done this thing, he's done these things where he's resurrected these night creatures, he's killing people, but at the same time he's doing it in a way that's very kind of grounded and like rooted in thought, self-thought, self-discovery, kind of, and morals as well. I don't think that's shirked away from with Isaac, and I love that he's given the ending that he is given. Let's talk a little bit about Hector. So and this actually feeds in a little bit to the things that I thought were kind of bad about the season. Feeds into, because I have mixed feelings. I think mostly positive about Hector and how it all ended for him. I loved as soon as we saw him that he started to reclaim some control. So obviously with season 3, that was part of the season 3 storyline that I found most compelling, was that dynamic between him and Lenore. And it's this thing where, you know, they have this bond and this relationship, but it's very kind of one-sided on Lenore's side. She's very dominating. She essentially turns him into this pet. She tricks him while being this intimate figure towards him and having this relationship. And that's one of the most intriguing and compelling arcs that I wanted to see played through in this season. And while I think on Hector's side, it was, you know, he reclaimed his power. He reclaimed some level of autonomy and individuality and power in that relationship. You know, the scales of power became more balanced towards the end. If anything, they overturned, because Lenore very much came out not on top at all. Yeah, you had this kind of dynamic where Hector was on top of things. He had these plans, he enacted them. Isaac came and was like, okay, this is the end, I'm gonna die. Isaac was like, no, that's not gonna happen. And Hector was like, oh shit, I didn't expect that, I don't know what to do now. And that was so human. It was human. It was just human. It was a human thing, and it was a human reaction. And he was this figure that had thought about stuff and everything, and had this plan and these plans, but hadn't had the foresight perhaps to see that what he'd eventually thought was going to happen didn't happen. And then it's like, oh shit, what do I do now? I love that. And especially because it gave him the power and this idea that he could go anywhere. So it's the kind of ending that leaves it to us as the audience to be like, no, that ended quite nicely. He can go now and do what he wants to do, free from these powers, free from the bond with Lenore. So I liked that, but then at the same time, this bond, this relationship between him and Lenore was kind of, I don't know, for me, emotionally, it wasn't a great payoff. You know, she ended up just committing suicide, considering last season and the way it was built up, and it wasn't given, I think, the time, and this is very personal to me, because it was one of the relationships that I was kind of quite invested in, and I wanted to see pay off. Lenore kind of lost all the power, and she was this figure, this woman who throughout the season had kind of come up against Carmilla and was starting to question things, and there was this opportunity for her to be like, right, this is what I want to be, and instead she was like, fuck, I give up. I had this whole plateau and it's been taken away from me, and now I don't know what to do. And I think it's this contrast actually, which is quite nice, I suppose, with Hector and Lenore, that they're both on the same playing field. They can essentially do what they want to do and reclaim who they are and decide who they are. Hector takes that in his stride and is like, yeah, I'm going to do that thing, and Lenore doesn't. And I think that's sad. And I don't know, I wanted, and I get it, and I think that was very purposeful, but for me it just lacked something, and I wanted more from that, and their relationship was kind of left to dissipate, which in itself is kind of nice. Not nice, but I get why, considering everything that happened. That's kind of that probably is a satisfying ending to that to a lot of people. To me, I wanted a little bit more. So okay, that's something that I have mixed feelings about. Now I'm going to kind of talk about the last part of the season and why for me it kind of went off the rails a little bit. So throughout this video so far, I've not mentioned Saint Germain at all, and I'm straight up. I'm just gonna tell you, like the whole season did him fucking dirty, mate. So dirty, legit. I was really intrigued for his story. It was something that I really liked from last season. It was something that introduced this element of like magic and these gateways and these alternate worlds that was like, oh wow, this is fucking me. I didn't expect this shit, you know. It's vampires and fantasy and gothic shit, you know, like, you know, the night creatures and all this, and suddenly there was this kind of sci-fi element to it, and I was like, fuck it, they've implemented this really well. I really like this. Saint Germain's kind of an interesting character. He's kind of fun to watch, if annoying at times, let's be honest. Anyway, and so yeah, so we see this payoff, and we kind of meet him. Alucard comes into what's the little village called, whatever the fuck, you know, and we see him, we're like, oh, that's Saint Germain, cool. And then we find out it's all he's playing a role, and you know, we go back and find out what happened with him, and it's like, ooh, spicy mama, baby, tasty morsel, right? It was good, it was nice, it was like, oh, okay, he's reclaimed this path of the alchemist, he's gonna forsake his morals and all this stuff for his one true love, blah blah blah. I don't even know her name. I can't remember. It was like a year ago that I saw season 3. Did we know her name? I'm not even sure. But in the flashback, and this was like one of the main, I think this was the first thing that I saw in the show that I was like, what? When we went to the flashback with Saint Germain and we met this character, his love interest that he's been searching for this whole time. This very, very important, very focal person to his story, to the story, because it becomes this thing. It's this drive, this motivation that drives us to the finale, right? It does. And you know, we've been with Saint Germain and we know him, and we've got this connection with him. I think there's enough emotional weight. They did a good job last season to give us that. And all they and then she came onto screen. She was this cool character, you know, this kind of strong badass woman who, you know, punches a fucking groper in the face. Bam, fuck you, get off me. And I'm like, cool, I want to see more of this. I want to see more of her. And I'm like, oh, at this point in the show, I'm like, fucking yes. The show's doing so well. It's going to endear me to her. It's going to make me care more about this. It's going to get, you know, make me care more about Saint Germain and his journey and what he's doing. And later on, it would have made me think like, oh, he's doing bad stuff, but I want him to be reunited with her, because I wanted that in season 3, but like, anyway, point is, they didn't even cast a voice for her. What the fuck? Like, what the fuck? And I get, and this is the thing, I think this is where the thing of them trying to do too many things in the final season to wrap things up came into play, because I don't think they had time. I think that was a very, and maybe for all I know, they were like, fuck, we want to give this more time and space, but we just don't have it. That was maybe the case. I think that made that whole through line very hollow, and it made me kind of think of I don't know, I just wasn't as invested in Saint Germain as I could have been or wanted to be, and I was ready for it. They set it up so well, and then she just didn't talk. Even if they'd had just one conversation, and just make it really sweet and warm and give us this flavor of their relationship, and then everything that Saint Germain was doing, I'd be sympathetic towards him, and I was ready for that, and it just didn't give me that. And then I was like, first of all, you've disrespected this fucking relationship, this woman, because you've literally not given her a voice, right? This very important, focal, emotional character, this emotional draw to a character that we know that goes through the story and dictates the story and where it goes, and you've not given that character a voice. And I was like, fuck, guys. And it was sad, because I wanted to care about Saint Germain, but I think he was done dirty. He was done very dirty, especially when you find out what happens to him and the fact that he was just duped this whole time. But then that duping could have felt so much, the heartache could have been so much. I didn't feel anything. I was like, oh, Saint Germain, you fucking idiot. The rug was pulled out from under me. But that could have been such a gut punch if they'd have done more with that little flashback scene, for me, I think. Oh, I am waffling. Okay, let's move it along. I you know, for me, Trevor's Trevor, and that's what makes him great. And we got that from him, and like, I don't have that much to say about Trevor. I was quite happy where he ended up. I honestly thought, and I'm going to talk about him briefly, because again, he's been such a staple of the show. He's one of the main characters, if not the main character of the show. And so actually this is a good point to talk about the main through line, I think, or at least where the show ended up with the Grim Reaper and death. I'm just going to straight out say it. I don't think that was built up very well. I think it could have been, and I think it had a lot about it that could have been so cool. And I think the character design of the Grim Reaper and the idea that he's been there all along as characters that we know, was a cool idea. And I liked that idea, and I liked the bare bones of it. I just don't... bones. Yeah, I just don't think it was implemented very well, basically. Not to mention... I mean, thinking now, and I wasn't thinking this at the time, literally talking about it now, I'm like, what... How more interesting would it have been if it had been if the Grim Reaper had been a character that we've known this whole time, and then we found out, oh, it's the Grim Reaper this whole time. It was just this guy, Varney, who wasn't very likable anyway. And, they kept the voice actor and, yeah, good work. That was obviously what they wanted and he did a great job. But I don't know. I didn't really like it that much, especially, it didn't, it's different. It's not what you see from the Grim Reaper. It's not, when you think of like the Grim Reaper's voice, that's not the voice that you think of. I just don't think it worked that well. I think it worked kind of well for Varney. It made him very unlikable. But that was the thing. I didn't really find him very compelling as a character. He was dipped in and out of the season, not really enough that I cared. Like his little sidekick, the guy who was having these, little identity issues, and he wasn't given loads to do. His little sidekick guy who's like, oh, I'm the vampire, blah, kill stuff all the time, right? I found him more compelling than Varney. I don't know, his little through line was kind of interesting. Again, it wasn't given enough time or space to kind of be anything. It was kind of a fun little aside, but I think taking the season as a whole, I was like, why have you given the time to that little kind of caveat of a story with him and Varney, when I think it was an effort to make Varney something, because obviously the reveal was Varney was more significant than we thought, so I think it was to give Varney more time to see him and see him interact with, people and that kind of thing. It was just very quick. It was very quick. There was not much given to it, I think, and it wasn't much of an emotional payoff because I didn't know Varney. He fucked over Saint Germain, which was, I think, the biggest emotional tugging of the heartstrings. But like I've said, Saint Germain became kind of hollow because of the reasons that I've mentioned. So it was like there was no emotion to that interplay, right? And the development, I think, of Varney and then the reveal that he was the Grim Reaper, it was kind of a moment of like, oh shit, I'm not actually that happy with that, because Varney wasn't a character that I thought, oh, he's kind of, It was just like, oh, okay. I don't know, I didn't find Varney that compelling. Now that I found out Varney's the Grim Reaper, fine. It makes the Grim Reaper less cool to me. Like, the show planted the idea of the Grim Reaper, but it was very small, it was very brief. The main kind of focus of the story was that people were trying to bring back Dracula. I think, by the way, the inclusion of that and the way that it was handled in the show, this faction of people trying to bring back Dracula, I think that was done really well. You had Varney involved, you had Hector involved, you had Saint Germain involved, and you found out all their kind of reasons for doing that, and I found that really cool. But that was the thing, that was the main focus of the show and the main kind of point of antagonism. And then that kind of came to nothing because it was where we were all going, and then it happened, and then the main kind of reveal and focus was then, oh, the Grim Reaper's there. Shit! It didn't even work. The Rebis didn't even work, and that wasn't a thing. Like, that whole thing was essentially building up towards the resurrection of Dracula and his wife, right? That's all that was there for. But I think the season focused on it so heavily that I wanted more from that. And I think because I wanted more from that and there was more time and focus given to that, the actual end and the finale with the Grim Reaper was a little bit less... It was more hollow than I think it should have been. And it wasn't built up and it wasn't planted enough earlier. The show didn't have me going, oh shit, who's the Grim Reaper? Is the Grim Reaper around? Oh, they mentioned the Grim Reaper. I guess that, that elemental being will maybe come into it at some point. I hope they do more to build that up and, tease that, because otherwise if it just happens, it's not going to really make me feel anything. And something that Castlevania does really, really fucking well. And actually, I have just recently watched Yasuke, which is a new anime show on Netflix. It was fine, whatever. Something I noticed on that was the combat was very bland. I wasn't that interested to watch it. If you saw one fight, you'd seen them all. Castlevania does this really well, where like the fight scenes and the way that they're choreographed and shown and displayed, and it's so compelling. It's so compelling, it's so fluid, and it flows so well, and it's so nice to watch and so entertaining to watch, and I love watching Castlevania fight scenes. And so, you know, when Trevor was fighting the Grim Reaper, I was enjoying that set piece. When Alucard was fighting, when they were all fighting, by the way, when the three, Cypher, Trevor and Alucard were fighting in Dracula's castle at the end, that was fucking great, by the way. That was so great. I loved that. But yeah, you know, you find yourself, everything that I've said, you know, means that you find yourself with Trevor fighting the Grim Reaper, looking like he's going to sacrifice himself. And I'm like, don't. And I don't feel the emotional stakes. And I was like, okay, they're doing this for Trevor and giving him like this heroic exit. Which, by the way, I was really glad that they didn't kill him off, actually, and the show fooled me. The show fooled me because, you know, it had been 2 weeks later after this grand fight, this big finale. Cypher was moping, and I was genuinely sad. I was so sad that, you know, they did that conversation between Cypher, Alucard, and the new girl. I can't remember. I really liked her, by the way, from the little village. They did that really well because it pulled on my heartstrings, and I was like, fuck, Cypher. You know, when Alucard was like, I think I'll call it Belmont, and it's like, oh, Alucard, my fucking heart, dude. I love that. And they played that so well. It made me feel so fucking shit that he had done what he'd done and that he was gone. And so I was so glad. I was so genuinely glad. And I usually hate that in things. I usually hate that if they like, you know, it's this big dramatic thing and it's like, oh, he's dead. No, he's not. I hate that usually. And I'm like, eye roll. But in this case, they really played that well, and they did that really, really well. And I think it's really a testament to the dialogue and that final scene and just what Castlevania had done with Trevor and Cypher and Alucard, who I think were the main characters, and they did that really, really well. And I was really happy with that. I was really happy with that ending for those characters. And I you know, I think there was more emotional meet with Alucard that didn't get kind of teased out by the show. I think with Trevor and Cypher, it worked better for me, and the payoff was better for me, and the ending was better for me for those characters because they are very kind of emotionally stable. You know, Trevor's Trevor, Cypher's Cypher. They have this dynamic that hasn't really changed that much. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I get. I'm not saying the relationship hasn't changed, because it has. But they are who they are, and the interplay and the conversation and the characters haven't changed that much. I think with Alucard, we saw him in this state of turmoil that didn't really get much time. I came off season 3 expecting him to be kind of this almost Dracula figure. Not Dracula, because Alucard very much isn't Dracula, but he was very bitter. He was very embittered. He was in a dark place. And I expected more time to have that played out. Instead, the show was like, no, go help these people. And he was like, fuck it, yeah, okay, sure. And he was Alucard again. And then he got a love interest, I guess. And she was great, by the way. I can't remember her name, sorry. But she was genuinely great. I think she, again, was a character they did well with the time they had. I want to see more from her. There's not much to say about her, because I think she was very much there for Alucard as opposed to being there for herself. With Alucard, it wasn't played out enough, I think, considering what we'd ended with in season 3. Oh god, I totally forgot, by the way. Shit. Season 3 ended in this place where you had this vampire family in Carmilla, Lenore, and the other two. I can't remember. They were really cool, by the way. I liked their little... All I'll kind of say about them was I liked their little story and how it went, and that's cool. It was cool. I liked it. Anyway, season 3 ended with this vampire family that were getting ready to take over the world. And that's where it was, for me, and that's, I think, for all of us, that was where season 4 was going, and what we were going to deal with, and what the main characters were going to be dealing with. And it didn't really go anywhere. Carmilla had these grand plans. Her inner turmoil was kind of touched upon, and then we kind of got to a point in the show where all her allies were like, ooh, I'm not so sure this is going to work, I'm out. We didn't get to see really any of that emotional clash between Lenore or the other two with Carmilla, because they all came to those kind of decisions. Lenore didn't really play hers out, but the other two were like, yeah, this isn't going to work for us. We're going to go back and we're going to have a conversation with Carmilla. They didn't get that. It was an easy way out, and I think that was quite emotionally cheap that Carmilla died before they could have that conversation. Again, I don't think there was time in the show to have that, so I understand why they did it. I know nothing was done with it. Like this Grand Crusade kind of ended in a whimper, and I think Carmilla, who was kind of a compelling character, powerful character, was done a little bit dirty, and it wrapped up very, very quickly. And I really liked that fight and the way that it went with Isaac, and I think with Isaac being there, and because I liked where his story went and finished. I liked Carmilla's ending as a kind of adjoining to his story. But I think if you look at Carmilla isolated on her own, I very much think the show didn't really do much with her. I think Carmilla and her story really ended in season 3. None of those threads were kind of really paid off. The decisions that were made around it with the vampire sisters, none of them confronted Carmilla. None of them had that emotional payoff that would have been satisfying and rounded that off a little bit more nicely. And it just kind of stopped and it just kind of deflated. Watching this season very much gave me the impression that everything that was set up in season 3, it was here, and then the season just kind of went. I enjoyed a lot about the season. I just think that because of what it was, because it was a final season, and I guess they were trying to wrap up the characters nicely and give everyone this send-off that people, you know, because they really did. They really tried to give everyone a send-off. I think with some it worked better than others. For me, it ended weakly. Last but not least, I'm going to finish very briefly on the ending and Dracula and his wife. This, for me, was also one of the moments in the show where I was like, I fucking hate this. And I think this is going to be a bit of a hot take. I think a lot of people probably liked it. I don't know. This is the day after I've watched it, the day after it's come out. I've seen no reactions. I don't know what people think of it. So one part of me is like, oh, great. He got his happily ever after. Because that was something that compelled me so much about the show at the beginning, was that, you know, you had this relationship, and the relationship between Dracula and his wife, I still don't know, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry. Testament, I guess, to how some of the women are treated in the show. Probably just my memory. Something that compelled me so much about the start of the show was this relationship and the dynamic between Dracula and his wife, and how it ended so briefly, or so abruptly. That was so heartbreaking. And something that immediately hooked me on the show, and made me want to see a bit more from Dracula in terms of emotional change and development and progression in that, which we didn't get. For me, I didn't think we got that. He very much was this, as the Grim Reaper said, he very much wanted to fucking burn the world, kill everybody, and that was Dracula. But that's my point. They got this nice send-off. If season 1 me, coming off the back of season 1, had seen that and knew that was going to happen, I'd have been so happy. So part of me is like, I want to like it, but the Dracula that we got and the Dracula in the show that we got didn't fucking deserve that. He didn't. He killed so many people. He went so backwards, and I'm guessing they had maybe some conversation in hell that meant that she was okay with what he did, but we didn't get to see that interplay. Again, I guess we didn't have time to develop that more. But the last we saw of Dracula, he was killing everybody. He had no mercy. He was off the rails. He wasn't ruling very well. It was all in disarray. He was ignoring everybody. He was disrespecting everybody. He very much was not a good character. He was not a nice character. He didn't deserve a happy ending based on what we saw. That scene all made sense to me when he started mentioning Whitby. And it's the tie-in to Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I liked that, and I liked that, but I watched that and I was like, oh, okay, that's why they've kind of done that. But that to me was a problem, because they didn't do it based on the emotional progression of that character and what he'd been through and what he'd done. The last we saw of this guy, he was not a good character. Again, it came under this kind of banner of giving the characters that we know and love a send-off that's satisfying. To me, it was in a way for the reasons that I've said, but I think mostly it seemed very odd. It seemed very odd and undeserving. And Dracula didn't deserve that. As much as it's nice to see, on the one hand, he didn't deserve that shit. Which is sad to say, but he didn't, and it seemed just out of place in the show for me. Okay, to summarise. Sorry, I have waffled on a lot, and to be honest, this might be a longer video, and that's okay, because to be honest, I love Castlevania. Like, genuinely, I love Castlevania, and it's the kind of world that they build up, and the showrunners have done it so well with the story, the characters, the visuals, and the animation style. For me, personally, they've done it so well that, like, I heard that this was the last season with these characters and that they're going to do a spin-off and more stuff, and I'm like, cool, I want to see more in this world. I'm just happy that we're going to see more, and they've shown that they can develop characters and create characters that are compelling, and I want to see more of it. Personally, by the way, I think story-wise, all the things that I'm talking about could have been solved with either more episodes or another season. I think it was rushed towards the end. I think the show very much became this thing of like, oh shit, we've got to wrap it all up. You've got to tie up all these characters, and I think some worked, some didn't. Finale of the show, where it ended with the Grim Reaper and Saint Germain being done dirty, Carmilla being done dirty, all the antagonism in the show that we had wasn't done that well for me. But I love it. I do love it. And the show, season 4 was good. I enjoyed season 4. Like, I blasted through it in a whole day. I just sat, I got some beers, and I just sat and watched it and ate and just had a good time, and it was great. And I don't really blame them for what they did, because they did have a lot to do and I'm sure there are decisions behind the scenes that I'm not aware of why they ended it with this season and didn't give more time to the little through lines that they created this season and the characters that they created this season. I think basically what this boils down to is, for me, the new stuff in season 4 didn't work out that well. The stuff that we've already had, everything that we know that we've had in previous seasons, whether it's Isaac, Trevor, Hector, Cypher, Alucard, all that stuff, that's the stuff that had the meat and the heart and what made me love this season, despite me thinking that it's the worst season to date of it. Doesn't mean that I think it's a bad season necessarily, or that I didn't like the season. I think that there were parts of the season that I didn't like, but I still enjoyed it for Castlevania. I think that's what, you know, I have to kind of end on and say, I love it, I love the world. Yeah. Let me know your thoughts. Perhaps things that I didn't like, I maybe missed something that maybe makes that thing better. Put that down in the comments, let me know. Talk about it with me. Let's have a good time with that. Let's all be civil, by the way. Don't you fucking, no hate. No fucking hate, okay? Thank you very much for watching. I've done 2 Let's Talks in a row, so my next video is going to be a commentary, full commentary. It will be coming soon. There are some links down in the description below. I've got a couple books on sale on Amazon. Go check those out if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in. They're also fantasy. Other than that, thank you, and I will see you next time.